The unexpected encounter. The neon-drenched streets of Novus Prime hummed with the constant buzz of hover traffic and the chatter of 1,000 alien species. Once a thriving human colony, the city had long since fallen under the control of the Zarkonian Empire, its towering spires and sprawling markets a testament to alien ingenuity and human subjugation. In the shadows of a narrow alley, far from the glittering main boulevards, a young human girl named Lyra crouched beside a huddled figure. The being before her was barely recognizable as sentient, its body a patchwork of mismatched cybernetics and tattered flesh. Lyra's hand trembled slightly as she extended a small package wrapped in a scrap of cloth. "Here," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant roar of the city. "It's not much, but it should help with the pain." The cyborg's one remaining organic eye widened, a flicker of surprise and gratitude visible in its depths. As gnarled fingers reached for the package, a harsh laugh cut through the air. Well, what do we have here?" The voice was cold, laced with cruel amusement. A little human girl playing hero in the gutters. Lyra's head snapped up, her heart pounding as she took in the sight before her. 3 Zarkonians blocked the alley's entrance, their scaled skin shimmering in the dim light. The leader, a towering figure with emerald scales and razor-sharp talons, stepped forward, his lips curled in a sneer. "Don't you know it's dangerous for your kind to be out alone, little one?" He taunted, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "Or perhaps you enjoy consorting with the dregs of society." Lyra stood slowly, positioning herself between the cyborg and the Zarkonians. Her brown eyes, flecked with gold, met the alien's gaze without flinching. "Everyone deserves kindness," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The Zarkonian's laugh was like shattered glass. "Kindness? In Novus Prime? Oh, you humans never cease to amuse me with your naivety." He turned to his companions, gesturing dramatically. "Do you see, my friends? This is why their species fell so easily. Always reaching out to help the weak, never realizing it only makes them weaker." As the other Zarkonians joined in the laughter, Lyra felt a surge of anger rising within her. She clenched her fists, struggling to maintain her composure. "You're wrong," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Compassion isn't weakness. It's the source of our greatest strength." The lead Zarkonian's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing in their reptilian depths. "Is that so?" he hissed, taking another step forward. "Then perhaps you'd like to demonstrate this strength of yours." Lyra tensed, preparing for the worst, when a raspy voice spoke up from behind her. "You mock what you do not understand, Zarkonian." All eyes turned to the cyborg, who had risen to his feet with surprising grace. There was something different about him now, an aura of power that seemed to ripple through the air. "This girl," the cyborg continued, his voice gaining strength with each word, "has shown more courage and wisdom in a single act than your entire empire has displayed in a century of rule." The lead Zarkonian's face contorted with rage. "How dare you, you pile of scrap? Do you know who I am?" A smile played at the corners of the cyborg's lips. "I know exactly who you are, Commander Vexthor. The question is, do you know who she is?" Confusion flickered across Vexthor's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. He turned back to Lyra, studying her more closely. "What game are you playing, old one? This is nothing more than a human brat, barely old enough to—" His words died in his throat as Lyra's eyes began to glow, a soft golden light emanating from within. The air around her shimmered, and for a moment, the illusion of the young girl seemed to waver, revealing glimpses of something more. "Impossible," Vexthor whispered, taking an involuntary step back. The cyborg's laughter echoed through the alley, a sound of genuine mirth that seemed at odds with his broken form. "You see, Commander, the one you mocked, the one you dismissed as weak and naive, is the very being your empire has sought for decades." Lyra stood tall, the golden light fading from her eyes, but leaving behind a presence that was undeniably regal. "I am Lyra Celestis," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "Rightful heir to the throne of the Terran Alliance, and the one your people know as the Hidden Queen." Vexthor and his companions stumbled backward, their earlier bravado evaporating in an instant. "My lady," Vexthor stammered, dropping to one knee. We didn't know. Please, forgive our ignorance." Lyra regarded them coolly, centuries of hidden knowledge evident in her gaze. "Rise, Commander. Your apology is noted, but it is not me you should be seeking forgiveness from." She gestured to the cyborg and the countless other forgotten souls that called the alley home. "It is those you have deemed unworthy of basic dignity and compassion who truly deserve your contrition." As the Zarkonians struggled to process this revelation, the cyborg stepped forward, his mechanical parts whirring softly. "The time has come, my queen," he said, bowing his head respectfully. "The stars align, and the prophecy nears its fulfillment." Lyra nodded, a mix of determination and sadness crossing her features. "I know, old friend. The game of shadows we've played for so long is coming to an end." She turned back to Vexthor, her voice taking on a tone of command. "Commander, you have a choice to make. The winds of change are blowing through Novus Prime. You can either stand with us and help usher in a new era of cooperation between our peoples, or you can cling to the old ways and be swept aside." Vexthor looked up, meeting Lyra's gaze. For a moment, the hardened soldier facade cracked, revealing a glimmer of the person beneath. I don't understand. How can you offer us a choice after everything we've done?" Lyra's expression softened slightly. "Because that, Commander, is the true strength of humanity. We believe in second chances, in the power of redemption. It's why I've spent years living among the people of this city, both human and alien alike. I needed to understand, to see with my own eyes the world we've created together, for better or worse." She extended her hand, not to Vexthor, but to one of his subordinates, a younger Zarkonian whose scales had yet to fully harden. "What say you? Are you brave enough to imagine a different future?" The young alien hesitated for a moment before reaching out, his clawed hand gently grasping Lyra's. As their fingers intertwined, a spark of golden energy danced between them, and the Zarkonian's eyes widened in wonder. I see it," he whispered, awe evident in his voice. "A city where no one is left behind, where strength comes from unity rather than domination." Lyra smiled, a genuine expression that seemed to light up the dim alley. "That's the future we can build together, but only if we're willing to take the first step." As the gravity of the situation settled over the group, the distant sounds of the city seemed to fade away. In that moment, in a forgotten corner of Novus Prime, the first seeds of a revolution were planted. The Hidden Queen had revealed herself, and nothing would ever be the same again. The cyborg chuckled softly, his mechanical eye gleaming. "And so it begins," he murmured. "The awakening of Novus Prime, and with it, the rebirth of hope for both our peoples." Lyra nodded, her gaze sweeping over the assembled group, Zarkonians, humans, and those who fell somewhere in between. "Indeed, old friend. The real work starts now." As night fell over the city, whispers began to spread through the shadowy networks that ran beneath the surface of Zarkonian rule. The Hidden Queen had returned, and with her, the promise of a new dawn for Novus Prime. Whispers of rebellion. The news of Lyra's revelation spread through Novus Prime like wildfire, igniting hope in some and fear in others. In the days that followed, the city's underbelly buzzed with activity as long-dormant networks of resistance stirred to life. Deep beneath the neon-lit streets, in a cavernous chamber that had once been part of the city's forgotten subway system, Lyra stood before a gathering of her most trusted allies. The room was a patchwork of races and species, each drawn to the promise of change that the Hidden Queen represented. "We've waited years for this moment," Lyra began, her voice carrying easily through the hushed space. "But now that it's here, we must move carefully. The Zarkonian Empire won't relinquish control easily. Kale, the cyborg who had stood with Lyra in the alley, stepped forward. His mismatched parts whirred softly as he addressed the group. Our network has already begun to spread the word. Humans and sympathetic aliens alike are rallying to our cause. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room, showing a map of Novus Prime. Various points of light pulsed across its surface, each representing a pocket of resistance or a potential ally. "We've made contact with workers in the industrial sector," a gruff voice called out. The speaker was a burly Triaxian, his purple skin crisscrossed with scars. "They're tired of Zarkonian exploitation. When the time comes, they'll stand with us." Murmurs of approval rippled through the gathered crowd, but Lyra held up a hand for silence. "It's a good start, Grax, but we need more than just numbers. We need to win the hearts and minds of all who call Novus Prime home." She turned to a slender figure shrouded in a hooded cloak. "Zira, what news from the upper levels?" The hood fell back, revealing the iridescent scales and elegant features of a Zarkonian female. Zira's presence caused a stir among some of the humans, but Lyra's unwavering trust in her was clear. "The nobility is divided," Zira reported, her voice tinged with a musical lilt. "Some see the winds of change and wish to negotiate. Others, they cling to the old ways, fearing what your ascension might mean for their power." Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Then we must give the moderates something to believe in, a vision of a future where all beings can prosper." As the meeting continued, plans were laid and strategies debated. But even as hope blossomed in the hidden chamber, dark forces were gathering above. In the towering spire that served as the seat of Zarkonian power, Governor Xarlon paced before a window that overlooked the sprawling cityscape. His scaled hands were clasped tightly behind his back, talons digging into his palms. "How could we have missed this?" he snarled, rounding on his advisors. "A human queen, hiding under our very noses for years." Commander Vexthor stood at attention, his earlier encounter with Lyra having shaken him to his core. "My lord, she possesses abilities we've never seen before. The stories of Terran royalty's power, they appear to be more than mere legend." Xarlon's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Abilities or not, she is a threat to everything we've built here. I want her found, and I want her eliminated." A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room, resolving into the lithe form of a Shadowkin assassin. "It will be done, Governor," the being hissed, its voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. As the assassin slipped away on its dark mission, Xarlon turned back to the window, his reflection grim in the reinforced glass. "Vexthor, increase patrols in the lower levels. Crush any whisper of rebellion before it can take root." "Yes, my lord," Vexthor replied, bowing deeply before exiting the chamber. But as he made his way to carry out his orders, doubt gnawed at him. The memory of Lyra's words, of the vision she had shared, refused to leave him. Back in the underground chamber, the resistance meeting was drawing to a close. As the various factions began to disperse, Lyra pulled Cal aside. "We need to accelerate our plans," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Xarlon won't sit idle for long." Kale nodded, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on her face. "What do you propose, my queen?" Lyra's lips quirked in a small smile. "First, old friend, we need to stop with the my queen business. I'm still Lyra, the same girl you've known all these years." "As you wish, Lyra," Cal replied, a touch of warmth in his mechanical voice. "But you didn't answer my question." Lyra's expression grew serious once more. "We need to make a public statement, something that can't be ignored or covered up. It's time to show Novus Prime and the galaxy that humanity is ready to reclaim its place." As they discussed the details of their daring plan, neither noticed the small drone that hovered in a shadowy corner of the chamber, its lens focused intently on their conversation. Miles away, in a dimly lit control room, a figure hunched over a bank of monitors, watching the feed from the drone with growing interest. The being's four eyes blinked in rapid succession, processing the information. "Oh my," it muttered, tentacles twitching with excitement. "This is going to change everything." The next day dawned over Novus Prime, the city's inhabitants going about their routines unaware of the forces gathering beneath the surface. In the bustling central market, aliens of all species haggled over exotic goods, their voices creating a cacophony that echoed off the towering buildings. Suddenly, every holoscreen and display in the market flickered, the usual advertisements replaced by a single image. Lyra's face, her eyes glowing with that unmistakable golden light. "People of Novus Prime," her voice rang out, clear and strong. "For too long, we have lived under the shadow of oppression and fear. But no longer. I am Lyra Celestis, rightful heir to the Terran throne, and I come to you with a message of hope." As her words washed over the stunned crowd, reactions varied wildly. Some cheered, others cowered, and still others looked around in confusion, unsure of what to make of this unexpected broadcast. "I do not seek to overthrow or conquer," Lyra continued. "I seek to unite. Humans, Zarkonians, and all other species who call this city home. We are stronger together than we ever could be apart. Join me in building a future where every being is valued, where compassion and innovation go hand in hand." In the governor's tower, alarms blared as Tarlon and his advisors scrambled to cut off the transmission. But no matter what they tried, Lyra's message continued to play on every screen in the city. "This is our moment." Lyra's voice resonated, filled with passion and conviction. "The moment we decide what kind of world we want to live in. Will you stand with me?" As her final words faded, the screens returned to normal, leaving a city in upheaval. In the streets, impromptu gatherings formed as people debated what they had just witnessed. The seeds of change had been planted, and now they began to sprout. But even as hope bloomed in the hearts of many, danger lurked in the shadows. The Shadowkin assassin slipped through the crowds, its eyes fixed on a distant target. Vexthor marshaled his forces, torn between duty and the growing realization that perhaps he was on the wrong side of history. And in her hidden base, Lyra steeled herself for the challenges ahead. She had taken the first step, revealed herself to the world. Now came the hard part, turning words into action, hope into reality. As night fell once more on Novus Prime, the city held its breath, poised on the knife's edge between the old world and the new. The game of shadows was over. The true battle for the soul of the planet was about to begin. In the quiet of her private chambers, Lyra gazed out at the glittering skyline, the weight of countless lives resting on her shoulders. "And so it begins," she whispered, echoing Cal's words from days before. "May we be worthy of the trust placed in us." The die was cast. The hidden queen had stepped into the light, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The hunt begins. The days following Lyra's broadcast were a whirlwind of activity across Novus Prime. The city, once rigidly controlled by Zarkonian authority, now seethed with an undercurrent of rebellion and hope. In response, Governor Xarlon had declared a state of emergency, flooding the streets with troops and drones, in a desperate attempt to maintain order. In the towering spire of the governor's palace, Xarlon paced before a group of his most trusted advisors and military leaders. His scales had lost their usual luster, dulled by stress and lack of sleep. "I want that human found," he roared, slamming a clawed fist onto the holographic display table. The image of the city flickered momentarily under the impact. "Every moment she remains free, our control slips further away." Commander Vexthor stepped forward, his posture rigid. "My lord, we've increased patrols in all sectors. We're monitoring communications, checking identity chips." But he hesitated, knowing his next words would not be well received. "The people are protecting her. Many see her as a symbol of hope." Xarlon's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Hope. She is a threat to everything we've built here. This city, this entire planet, exists because of Zarkonian rule. Without us, they'd still be living in caves. From the shadows, a silky voice spoke up. Perhaps, Governor, we're approaching this from the wrong angle. All eyes turned to the Shadowkin assassin, its form seeming to shift and waver in the dim light. The girl has allies, supporters. We find them, we find her. A cruel smile spread across Xarlan's face. Yes, I like that. Vexthor, implement a new strategy. Anyone suspected of aiding this queen is to be arrested immediately. Make examples of them. Let's see how long her support lasts when the price becomes too high. As the meeting dispersed, Vexthor lingered behind, conflict evident in his eyes. The memory of Lyra's words, of the future she had shown him, warred with his lifelong loyalty to the Empire. With a heavy heart, he set out to carry out his orders, praying to gods he'd long since stopped believing in for guidance. Deep in the underground network of tunnels and forgotten spaces that honeycomb Novus Prime, Lyra and her inner circle gathered to plan their next move. The atmosphere was tense. News of Xarlan's crackdown had reached them, along with reports of supporters being rounded up across the city. We need to strike back. Grax, the scared Triaxian, growled. Show them we won't be intimidated. Lyra shook her head, her golden-flecked eyes filled with determination. Violence will only beget more violence. We need to win the hearts and minds of the people, not give Xarlan an excuse to paint us as terrorists. Zira, the Zarkonian defector, stepped forward. My contacts in the upper levels report growing unrest among the nobility. Many are questioning Xarlan's heavy-handed tactics. If we could sway them to our side. It's too risky, Kel interjected, his cybernetic parts whirring softly. We can't trust the nobility. They'll turn on us the moment it serves their interests. As the debate raged on, a young human woman burst into the chamber, her face flushed with exertion. My queen, she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. They've taken the market district. They're arresting everyone, accusing them of harboring you. A hush fell over the room as the implications sank in. Lyra's face hardened, her earlier reluctance replaced by steely resolve. Enough, she said, her voice quiet but filled with authority. We can no longer stand by while innocent people suffer in our name. She turned to Kale, her oldest and most trusted advisor. Prepare our forces. It's time we showed Novus Prime that we're more than just words and promises. As plans were quickly formulated, none of them noticed the small, spider-like drone that scuttled along the ceiling, its camera recording every word and gesture. Miles away, in a cluttered workshop filled with screens and half-assembled gadgets, the four-eyed alien watched the feed with growing excitement. Tentacles flying over various interfaces, it began compiling the data, adding it to an ever-growing file simply labeled the Queen's Gambit. Oh, this is getting good, it muttered, a grin spreading across its bulbous face. The galaxy's going to pay a fortune for this story. Back in the market district, chaos reigned. Zarkonian troops moved methodically through the streets, hauling away anyone who showed even the slightest resistance. Cries of protest filled the air, mingling with the harsh orders of the soldiers and the low hum of hovering drones. Amidst the turmoil, a group of cloaked figures moved with purpose, slipping from shadow to shadow. Led by Grax, they carried with them packages of supplies and small, encrypted communication devices. Remember, Grax rumbled to his team, our job is to get these supplies to the safe houses. No engaging the enemy unless absolutely necessary. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a Zarkonian patrol. For a moment, both groups froze, shock evident on both sides. Then, with a roar, the soldiers raised their weapons. Scatter, Grax bellowed, hurling a small device at the patrol. It exploded in a brilliant flash of light, momentarily blinding their attackers. The rebels broke in all directions, weaving through the crowded streets with practiced ease. Grax found himself running alongside a young avian, her wings tucked tight against her back to avoid detection. This way, she chirped, gesturing toward a narrow alley. I know a shortcut. As they ducked into the passage, the sounds of pursuit growing distant, Grax allowed himself a small smile. The people of Novus Prime were rising up, finding courage they never knew they had. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, Lyra herself led a daring mission. Flanked by Kale and a small team of skilled operatives, she moved through the upper levels of a massive arcology, heading for the central communications hub. "Are you sure about this?" Kale asked, his mechanical eye scanning constantly for threats. "If we're caught." Lyra's lips quirked in a wry smile. "Then we'd better not get caught, old friend." As they approached their target, alarms suddenly blared to life. A voice, cold and menacing, echoed through the corridors. "Attention all units. The rebel leader has been spotted in Sector 7. Converge and apprehend immediately." "Well," Lyra sighed, drawing a sleek energy pistol from her belt. "So much for the element of surprise." The next few minutes were a blur of action. Lyra and her team fought their way through waves of security drones and Zarkonian troops, their progress slowed but never halted. As they neared the communications center, Lyra's eyes began to glow with that otherworldly golden light. "Stand back," she commanded, stepping forward to face the reinforced door that blocked their path. Placing her hands on the cold metal, she closed her eyes in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protest, the door began to buckle and warp. Cracks appeared in its surface, spreading like a web until, with a final shriek of tearing metal, it collapsed inward. "By the stars," one of the team whispered, awe evident in his voice. The legends were true. Lyra stumbled slightly, the display of power having taken its toll. Kale was instantly at her side, supporting her. "We need to move quickly," he urged. "That little trick of yours is sure to have attracted attention." Inside the communications hub, technicians cowered behind banks of equipment, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Lyra raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "But we need your help." As Kale and the others secured the room, Lyra approached the main control panel. Her fingers flew over the interface, inputting a series of complex commands. "This," she explained to the stunned technicians, "is the truth about what's happening in Novus Prime. The people deserve to know." On screens across the city, the Xarlon's carefully crafted propaganda was replaced by raw footage. Images of innocent civilians being arrested, of the resistance providing aid and comfort, of Lyra herself standing against injustice. In the governor's palace, Xarlon watched in impotent rage as his narrative crumbled. "Find her," he screamed at his subordinates. "I don't care what it takes. Bring me that human's head." But it was too late. The truth was out, spreading like wildfire through the city and beyond. The hunt for the hidden queen had begun in earnest, but so too had the real revolution. As Lyra and her team made their daring escape from the communications hub, weaving through service tunnels and maintenance shafts, she allowed herself a moment of hope. "We've struck the first real blow," she said to Kale as they paused to catch their breath. "Now we see if Novus Prime is ready for change." The city above them churned with activity, a powder keg ready to explode. The next move would determine the fate of not just Novus Prime, but potentially the entire galaxy. And as the hidden queen slipped back into the shadows, the true battle for freedom was only just beginning. Revelations and betrayals. The aftermath of Lyra's daring broadcast sent shockwaves through every level of Novus Prime. In the days that followed, the city teetered on the brink of all-out rebellion. The lower levels erupted in spontaneous protests, while in the upper echelons, whispers of discontent grew louder among the Zarkonian nobility. Governor Xarlon, his grip on power slipping, resorted to increasingly desperate measures. Martial law was declared, and anyone suspected of sympathizing with the resistance faced immediate arrest. But with each act of oppression, more citizens flocked to Lyra's cause. In a secret chamber deep within the industrial sector, Lyra and her inner circle gathered to plan their next move. The room hummed with nervous energy, a mix of hope and fear palpable in the air. "Our numbers grow by the hour," Grax reported, his scared face set in a grim smile. "But so do our casualties. Exarlon's forces are getting more aggressive." Zira, the Zarkonian defector, nodded in agreement. "My contacts in the upper levels report increasing unrest. Several noble houses are considering throwing their support behind us, but they fear reprisal." Lyra absorbed the information, her golden-flecked eyes thoughtful. "We need to strike a decisive blow, something that will tip the scales in our favor once and for all." Kale, ever the voice of caution, spoke up. "We must be careful, Lyra. Push too hard, too fast, and we risk losing everything we've gained." As the discussion continued, a commotion outside the chamber drew their attention. Moments later, a young human burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "My queen, we've intercepted a transmission from the governor's palace. You're not going to believe this." The group gathered around a holographic display as the intercepted message played out before them. Governor Xarlon's scaled visage appeared, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and rage. "Must not fall into rebel hands," his voice crackled through the speakers. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Destroy the archives if necessary, but do not let them discover the truth about Project Rebirth." As the transmission ended, a stunned silence fell over the room. Lyra's brow furrowed in concentration. "Project Rebirth. Kale, what do you know about this?" The cyborg's mechanical eye wared as he accessed long-buried memories. It's only a rumor, something I heard whispers of years ago. A secret Zarkonian initiative, supposedly tied to the fall of the Terran Alliance." Zira stepped forward, her iridescent scales shimmering in the dim light. "I've heard similar whispers among the nobility. Some believe it holds the key to the Zarkonians' rapid expansion across the galaxy." Lyra's eyes hardened with determination. "Whatever it is, Exarlon is terrified of us finding out, which means we absolutely must uncover the truth." Plans were quickly formulated. A small, elite team would infiltrate the heavily guarded archives, while the bulk of their forces launched diversionary attacks across the city. It was a risky gambit, but the potential payoff was too great to ignore. As preparations were made, Lyra pulled Kale aside. "I need you to lead the main assault," she said, her voice low. "Keep Xarlon's forces occupied while I go after the archives." Kale's organic eye widened in surprise. "Lyra, no. It's too dangerous. Let me go with you." She placed a hand on his metallic shoulder, a gesture of affection and trust. "I need someone I can rely on to coordinate our forces. There's no one I trust more than you, old friend." Reluctantly, Kale nodded. As Lyra turned to leave, he called out, "Be careful, my queen. I have a feeling we're about to uncover something that will change everything." Hours later, as Novus Prime erupted into carefully orchestrated chaos, Lyra and a small team of elite operatives made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the archives. The vast repository of knowledge, usually bustling with activity, was eerily quiet. "It's too easy," Grax growled, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "Where are the guards?" As if in answer to his question, a squad of Zarkonian troops rounded the corner ahead, weapons raised. "Intruders," their leader shouted. "Protect the archives at all costs." What followed was a frantic battle through the twisting corridors of the archives. Lyra and her team fought with desperate intensity, knowing that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. As they pushed deeper into the complex, the resistance grew fiercer. Finally, they reached a massive vault door, its surface etched with ancient Zarkonian symbols. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes beginning to glow with that otherworldly golden light. As she placed her hands on the door, the symbols began to pulse and shift. "Impossible," a voice rasped from behind them. The team whirled to find Commander Vexthor standing there, flanked by a contingent of elite guards. "No human should be able to interface with our technology like that." Lyra turned to face him, her expression a mixture of determination and sadness. There's a lot about humans you don't understand, Commander. Just as there's much about your own history that's been hidden from you. Vexthor's eyes narrowed. Step away from the vault, human. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I must. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, to everyone's surprise, Lyra lowered her hands. You're right, Commander. There's been enough violence. But before you arrest us, don't you want to know the truth? The real reason why the Zarkonian Empire fears the return of the Terran Queen. Doubt flickered across Vexthor's face. His earlier encounter with Lyra, the vision she had shared, still haunted him. What are you talking about? Lyra gestured to the vault door. The answers are right here, Commander. Project Rebirth, the fall of the Terran Alliance, all of it. Are you brave enough to face the truth, even if it challenges everything you've been taught to believe? Vexthor hesitated, centuries of ingrained loyalty warring with a growing sense that something was fundamentally wrong with the empire he served. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he lowered his weapon. Open it, he commanded. As the massive door slowly swung open, revealing a chamber filled with holographic displays and ancient artifacts, alarms began to blare throughout the archives. Governor Xarlon's voice echoed through the complex, tinged with panic. Attention all forces. The archives have been breached. Initiate scorched earth protocols immediately. Vexthor's eyes widened in shock. He's going to destroy everything, including us. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos, filled with an authority that seemed to transcend her years. We don't have much time. Commander, if you ever want to know the truth about your people, about the galaxy itself, you need to make a choice. Here. Now. As the sounds of approaching destruction grew louder, Vexthor looked from Lyra to his troops and back again. In that moment, he saw not a rebel or an enemy, but a leader offering a chance at redemption. With a quick gesture to his soldiers, Vexthor made his decision. We're with you, he said, his voice filled with a mix of fear and resolve. Now let's see what secrets are worth destroying an entire archive to protect. As they rushed into the chamber, the first explosions rocked the archives. Time was running out, but the truth, a truth that would shake the foundations of the galaxy, was finally within reach. Lyra's eyes scanned the holographic displays, absorbing centuries of hidden knowledge in moments. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, and finally to a grim determination. By the stars, she whispered, it's worse than we could have imagined. As the ceiling began to crumble around them, Lyra turned to her unlikely allies. We need to get this information out, no matter the cost. The fate of not just Novus Prime, but the entire galaxy, depends on it. With Vexthor and his troops now fighting alongside them, Lyra and her team began the desperate race to escape the collapsing archives, carrying with them secrets that would forever change the balance of power in the cosmos. But even as they fought their way to freedom, none of them realized that their every move was being watched, recorded by hidden eyes that saw the potential for the greatest story the galaxy had ever known. In his cluttered workshop, the four-eyed alien leaned back, tentacles twitching with excitement. Oh, this is it, he chuckled, adding the latest footage to his ever-growing file. The story of the century, and I've got it all. The Queen, the Empire, the hidden truth. The galaxy will never be the same. As Novus Prime burned and a hidden queen ran with secrets that could topple empires, the stage was set for a finale that would echo across the stars for generations to come. The queen rises. The dawn broke over Novus Prime, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. But the beauty of the sunrise was lost on the city's inhabitants, who awoke to a world forever changed. The night's events had left scars both physical and metaphorical. Buildings lay in ruins, the archives were nothing more than a smoking crater, and the carefully constructed lies of the Zarkonian Empire lay shattered. In the heart of the industrial sector, in a hastily assembled command center, Lyra stood before a gathering of her allies. Her face was smudged with soot, her clothes torn, but her eyes blazed with an inner fire that seemed to illuminate the room. What we discovered in the archives, she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the knowledge she now carried. "Changes everything we thought we knew about our history, about the very nature of our conflict with the Zarkonians." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on their queen. Even Commander Vexthor, still coming to terms with his defection, leaned forward intently. Project Rebirth wasn't just a Zarkonian initiative, Lyra continued. It was a joint effort, begun centuries ago by both our peoples. The Terran Alliance and the Zarkonian Empire, working together to combat a threat so great it could have wiped out all life in the galaxy. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Kale, his mechanical parts still bearing scorch marks from the night's battles, spoke up. What kind of threat could unite two empires at the height of their power? Lyra's expression grew grim. The Void Eaters, an ancient race of energy beings that consume entire star systems. Our ancestors discovered evidence of their approach and realized that neither of our civilizations alone had the strength to stop them. She activated a holographic display, showing star charts and complex equations. Project Rebirth was an attempt to create a new form of life, one that could harness the combined strengths of both our species. But something went wrong. The project created something unexpected. The hologram shifted, showing a familiar golden light. "Me," Lyra said softly. "Or rather, beings like me, humans with the ability to tap into the fundamental forces of the universe itself." Shock rippled through the room. Zira, the Zarkonian defector, stepped forward. "But if this was a joint project, why did our peoples end up at war?" Lyra's eyes flashed with anger, fear, greed, the eternal failings of sentient beings. When the Zarkonian leadership realized the power that had been unlocked, they tried to seize control of the project. The result was a war that nearly destroyed both our civilizations and left the galaxy vulnerable to the very threat we had sought to prevent. She turned to Vexthor, her gaze softening slightly. "Your people aren't evil, Commander. They're scared. The Empire's expansion, its brutal tactics, it's all been driven by the knowledge that something is coming, something they don't believe they can face alone." Vexthor nodded slowly, centuries of propaganda and misinformation crumbling in the face of this new truth. "And now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra straightened, her bearing regal despite her battered appearance. "Now we do what our ancestors should have done. We stand together, human, Zarkonian, and every other species in this galaxy. It's the only way we'll survive what's coming." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. A young technician called out, panic evident in her voice. "My queen, we're detecting massive energy signatures entering the system. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Lyra's expression hardened. "They're here. Earlier than we expected, but not too soon. We've been given a chance that our ancestors never had. The opportunity to face this threat united." She turned to address the room, her voice ringing with authority. "Kale, I need you to coordinate our ground forces. Secure the city, but prioritize evacuation of civilians to the emergency shelters. Vexthor, contact every Zarkonian ship in the sector. Tell them the Hidden Queen calls for aid." As her allies rushed to carry out her orders, Lyra made her way to a communications terminal. With a deep breath, she opened a channel that would broadcast across every frequency, to every corner of the known galaxy. "People of the galaxy, of every world, and every species, I am Lyra Celestis, rightful heir to the Terran throne and protector of Novus Prime. I come to you now not as a queen, not as a human, but as a fellow sentient being facing annihilation." Her words echoed across countless worlds, in space stations, and on starships, in the palaces of emperors and the homes of ordinary citizens. At this moment, an ancient enemy approaches, one that threatens not just our world, but every world. The Void Eaters, consumers of stars and destroyers of life, have returned. Our ancestors faced this threat, and in their fear, turned on each other. We cannot make the same mistake. Images began to flash across screens galaxy-wide. The battle for Novus Prime, the secrets of the archives, and finally, the looming threat visible even to the naked eye, as dark spots began to blot out the stars. I call now for a unity our galaxy has never known. Zarkonians, humans, and every species that values life and freedom, stand with us. The petty conflicts that have divided us mean nothing in the face of extinction. Together, we have a power our ancestors only dreamed of. Apart, we are doomed. As Lyra's impassioned plea rang out across the stars, something remarkable began to happen. Ships of all sizes and configurations began appearing in the skies above Novus Prime. Zarkonian battlecruisers flew alongside hastily armed human merchant vessels. Alien races that had been bitter enemies for generations now formed battle lines together. In the command center, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Cheers erupted as news of reinforcements arrived, each new ally strengthening their chances against the cosmic horror that approached. Lyra stood at the heart of it all, her eyes glowing with that otherworldly golden light. She could feel the power within her growing, resonating with the united will of countless beings across the galaxy. As the first tendrils of the Void Eater's dark energy began to probe the system's defenses, Lyra turned to her assembled allies, a mix of determination and hope on her face. "This is it," she said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to transcend time and space. "Everything we fought for, everything we've lost and gained, it all comes down to this moment." She raised her hand, golden energy crackling around her fingers. "Are you with me?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Humans, Zarkonians, and a dozen other species raised their voices in a thunderous affirmation. In that moment, the last vestiges of old hatreds and fears melted away, replaced by a unity of purpose that would shake the very foundations of the universe. As Lyra prepared to lead the charge against an enemy that had haunted the nightmares of countless civilizations, a small smile played at the corners of her lips. This, she realized, was the true power of humanity. Not the golden energy that flowed through her veins, but the ability to inspire hope, to unite even the most unlikely allies in the face of impossible odds. The battle that followed would be spoken of for millennia to come. It was a clash of cosmic forces, of ancient horrors against the combined might of a galaxy united. And at the center of it all stood a young queen who had once been mocked for showing kindness to a beggar, now revealed as the linchpin in the salvation of all sentient life. As the golden light of Lyra's power mixed with the advanced technology of 100 worlds, pushing back the encroaching darkness, the truth became clear. The greatest strength of any species, of any civilization, lay not in conquest or domination, but in the simple yet profound power of compassion, unity, and hope. The Void Eaters, for all their ancient might, could not stand against the combined will of a galaxy that had chosen to stand as one. As the last of the cosmic horrors were banished back to the dark spaces between the stars, a cheer went up that seemed to shake the very fabric of space-time. In the aftermath, as the dust of battle settled, and the peoples of the galaxy began the long process of rebuilding, Lyra stood once more before a vast audience. But this time, it was not just the inhabitants of Novus Prime who listened. Representatives from every corner of the known universe had gathered to hear the words of the woman who had united them all. "We have won a great victory," Lyra began, her voice carrying the weight of all they had endured and achieved. "But our true challenge lies ahead. We have seen what we can accomplish when we set aside our differences and work together. The question now is, what will we do with this unity in times of peace?" As discussions began of a new galactic alliance, of sharing knowledge and resources for the betterment of all, Lyra felt a profound sense of hope. The road ahead would not be easy. Centuries of mistrust and conflict could not be erased overnight, but the first steps had been taken. In a quiet moment amidst the celebrations, Lyra found herself standing with Kale and Vexthor, looking out over the city they had fought so hard to protect. "You know," Vexthor said, a note of wonder in his voice, When I first saw you helping that beggar, I thought you were a fool. Now I understand that it was that very act of kindness that saved us all." Lyra smiled, reaching out to clasp both their hands, one flesh, one metal, one scaled. "That's the beauty of compassion," she said softly. "You never know how far its ripples will spread." As the sun set on a new era for the galaxy, the legend of the hidden queen who became the savior of all began to spread. But for Lyra, the greatest victory was not the defeat of an ancient enemy or the unification of countless worlds. It was the knowledge that, in the end, the simple human qualities of kindness, hope, and the willingness to stand up for what's right had proven to be the most powerful forces in the universe. The story of Novus Prime and its hidden queen would be told and retold across the stars for generations to come, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of human spirit could illuminate the way forward for all.